Hello and welcome to Turning Point Tactics, the competitive Kill Team 40k podcast and YouTube channel, focused on giving you the strategies and tactics to seize initiative every turning point. I'm your host Ryan, and I'm here to give you the tips and tricks to elevate every part of your Kill Team experience. If you enjoy this content and you want more, you can join our Patreon for as little as £3 a month. We'll get access to our Discord, patron priority questions, early access to videos including Kill Team bat reps, faction guides, and much more. If that's not for you, you can support just by hitting like, subscribe, and sharing these videos amongst the community of Kill Team enthusiasts local to you. Finally, if you're looking to buy some new miniatures or paints, you can buy them through Element Games, getting a 15% discount, and if you use our affiliate link below, you'll support the show as well. With all that said, let's get into it. Okay, so there's been a new balanced data slate. Everyone wants to know what's hot, what's not. Everyone wants to see a tier list, right? So this week we're going to go through the tier list that I think is representative of the competitive meta, and understand this is all about teams being played at their very best. This isn't a casual Thursday night thing. This is a tournament match, top tier players playing against each other. Which teams are going to be very successful, which teams aren't. That being said, a lot of people do want to know about Compendium. I'm not going to dwell on Compendium because I think it's, the game isn't balanced around it. So, it's kind of a pointless thing. So what I've done is I've just thrown up a tier list for Compendium, what I think's good, what I think is meh, and what I think is bad, right? So you can have a look at that, and you can play with Compendium as much as you want, but I'm not going to go into any more detail on that. So the first tier that we need to look at is a double hello tier. So maybe you're a fan of double pleasantries. Maybe you like to, reject the meta and embrace pleasantries instead, whatever it's going to be. You're not searching for the win. You're searching for the enjoyment, and you want some challenge, right? So if that's the kind of player that you are, you would probably pick a team from the double hello tier. So these are teams that I think actively need a buff. So they're not quite strong enough to consistently compete at the higher levels. And the way this works is the team on the right side is the weakest and the team on the left side is the strongest, and that's the way I've tried to sequence all of these going forward. So let's start with that then. So the team number one is going to be the Hearthkin Salvages. Now, I was debating this as bottom place with some of the others, but I think it's going to go to them. And the reason that I think this is the case is they're just not quite there yet. And I was talking to one of the guys at the club. He's a really, really good player. He's been playing this team for a while, and he talks about just how massive that +1 inch movement has been for them. So that they've gone from being basically unplayable to now being playable. But you are reliant on your opponent making a mistake, and you have to play a sort of a perfect game, which over the course of 4 tournament games is just rough. If you miss position slightly, you're probably going to get punished and all that sort of stuff as well. So how do you fix this team? Right? So what buff do they need? I think the common one that's thrown out there is +1 wound, which would help in the sense that they wouldn't be injured as much. So you would still be moving at 5 inches, which might solve their problem. But it also might just make them really durable versus shooting teams, because they all have 3-up saves. So suddenly they become really skewed against elites. Like Intercession would hate playing against this team. So it's a pretty fine balance. And I was wondering if actually it's more of their reliability that's the issue, because they have to get within 6 inches to be able to increase their ballistic skill. They have access to rerolls, but it's a telegraph. It's like, I'm going to have a reroll here, and there's a way for you to remove it. And the grudge tokens, you have to roll a hit first, right? So if you're only rolling 2 hits, the fact that they've got 3 grudge tokens is completely irrelevant. So I'm wondering if, rather than giving them the +1 wound, which you could do, if maybe that tweak to the grudge tokens where you effectively make it into the Inquisition Mystic. So you make a miss into a hit or a hit into a crit for each grudge token. That would just increase their reliability, make them a little bit more killy, a little bit more scary. And then potentially their game plan would be, we're not going to move out and score 4 points on turn 1 because they just don't have the movement potential to do so. But actually it's going to be, instead, we're going to try and get 4 points on turn 4 or turn 3 and turn 4 instead. And that could be the way to do it. And the other option I sort of thought about when trying to fix this team is, with the Ancestors are watching, if it was a free shoot, a free fight, or a free mission action, that might just mean that they can play the objective a little bit better, because effectively all it is they're just struggling to get the range and the movement to get onto the objectives and score, and that might just let you do it where you need it potentially there. So that's kind of my thoughts on that team. Next, we're into Crute. So the reason Crute is so low is because they have some really, really horrible matchups. And I know people will say, "Oh yeah, but Crute are fine into your Tau, your Blooded, your Vet Guard, and that sort of stuff." And you're right, they are into those teams that they perform fine. But if you try and play Crute into Colts, you play Crute into Beastmen, you play Crute into Exaction Squad, you can play Crute into Intercession or Legionary. It's just rough, right? So, like, those teams just dismantle Crute. I don't really think that there's much of a way that Crute can get around that. So, how Crute going to be fixed? I think they need access to some tools to really deal with the elites. So maybe their AP one shots become not limited and that kind of thing. But I know that would have a skew against some other teams. But like, they also just need those Colts and Beastmen to be toned down, because at the moment they're a melee horde that if they go into another melee horde, basically auto lose, which is really, really rough for them. So I think that's kind of where I'm at with them. They will be better when the rest of the meta is sort of like evened out a little bit. But for now, they're going to sit down at the bottom, because if you run into a competent elites player, you run into those top tier teams, it's just rough. Next on the list is going to be the Wormblade. And so Wormblade are in an interesting place because I think they're okay on open board. Like they have all the right tricks and they have the right abilities, but they're inherently linked to these sort of like key cult agent models that do most of the lifting. So actually, when it comes to like threats in the team, there's not that many. And if you're quite efficient at dismantling those threats, suddenly the team kind of falls apart. And the issue is on, like, say, Into the Dark, is those key models that they don't get as much utility because they can't move around the board so freely. So they sort of get locked into these channels, and it's very easy for them to either be, to reduce what they can do in a very limited area, or to be trapped in that area and killed quite efficiently. And then suddenly the team sort of falls apart. So I would like to see some elements of, an Into the Dark buff for this team. I think that's probably where they're weakest. So I actually have an interesting idea of how to buff Wormblade. And this might sound mental, but I think you just take away the restriction on how many cult agents they can take. So, like, that really, I think, fits the flavor of the team, and it lets them have more of those sort of killy models that need to do stuff. It lets them have more 3 APL models to be able to work in ITD. It means that their Seek and Destroy tack-ups are easier to score because they could potentially have 2 very good melee operatives for Rob and Ransack or for Rout and that sort of thing, and they'd be more survivable. I understand that, that sounds really powerful on paper. And I think maybe it is. Maybe you just increase it to a maximum of 3 initially. But it is a trade-off, right? They are losing 2 of their neophytes to be able to get one of the cult agents. And I just think it thematically works really well, and it makes the team much more fun. Now, maybe that makes them too powerful. Maybe they would skyrocket as a result. But just like giving them access to 3 cult agents rather than 2, I think it could be really interesting. I'd love to see how that plays out. Okay, so next up, we got Warp Coven. So they're an interesting place. I think they're now the right level of durability and the right level of killiness. I just think that maybe I still think it's their tack ops. So I just think playing security with this team is really rough because you can't move too fast because all is dust, which I do get. I understand why thematically that exists and that sort of stuff, which is fine. So if you're playing with the rubrics, that then gives you the killing and defensive profile that you need, but then you're not going to score your attack ops very well. And then if you play with the Zangors, you get the movement and you get the attack ops that you need, but you then lose your offensive reliability. And like Zangors at the moment into any of the sort of top teams, your Colts, your Beastmen, etc. That sounds pretty horrendous. If you run Zangors into Exaction Squad, like 8 wounds, you're just going to get popped. So I feel like rubrics is the answer. And I feel like it's their issue with attack ops. And maybe just removing the caveat of, how many Zangors you need for recon or whatever. Or if there is a Zangor operative in your kill team, you can have recon. If there is a rubric operative in your kill team, you can have security. Because then you could take 2 Zangors and run 5 rubrics. I think that'd be a nice balance. You'd be 7 activations, you'd be elite, it would work. So That's kind of what I'm thinking. I want to get these guys out on the table because I feel that they have so many tricks and tips and stuff, but they're all linked into these sorcerers, and those sorcerers are like the only ways for you to be able to get up the board quickly and score objectives. They're the only way to kill your opponent reliably, and they're also now trying to do everything else with tac ops and all that sort of stuff, and they just get maxed out. And as soon as you start losing sorcerers, the team falls apart really quickly. So that's kind of where I'm at with this team. The other option, of course, is you just make them unnecessarily durable and just give them all +1 wound for the rubrics and the sorcerers, and they can just sit in the middle of the board slowly trying to get security tac ops. But I think that'd be a bit boring personally. So I'd rather see those other fixes tried rather than that. That brings us to the end of the episode. Hopefully you found something new or useful while listening, and if you did, throwing us a like would be greatly appreciated. If you want to make sure you don't miss any episodes, make sure you hit that subscribe button and click on the bell so you get notifications as soon as the next one drops. It really is the best way to help a small channel like ours. And if you can't wait and you do want early access, we have a Patreon where you get exclusive access to all our content ahead of time. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Just drop a comment below and we'll get right to you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host Ryan. This has been Turning Point Tactics, and we'll see you next week.